A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Boy, I wish that every judge in the land would take that language of the Second Amendment to heart. Unfortunately, that is not the case. We're going to talk about the latest court decision dealing with your right to keep and bear arms during a state of emergency, during these shutdown orders. Amy Swear of the Heritage Foundation going to be with us here in just a matter of moments, talking about the decision out of the U.S. District for Southern California, where a federal judge on Monday afternoon refused to grant a temporary injunction that would have prevented Los Angeles County Sheriff Alex Villanueva from changing his mind again and closing gun stores. They are open at the moment in L.A. County, but this legal case had been brought by NRA, Second Amendment Foundation, Firearms Policy Coalition, and a couple of other state-level gun groups, as well as some individuals, seeking this injunction. Originally, they filed this lawsuit seeking to have the gun stores reopen. And then Sheriff Alex Villanueva, a couple of days after that lawsuit was filed, saw the new guidance from the Department of Homeland Security, the federal guidance that declared the firearms industry is an essential business. And Sheriff Villanueva said, all right, we'll let the stores open. The lawsuit, however, continued. And a federal judge ruled again on Monday afternoon that this is still a live issue because Sheriff Villanueva could change his mind again, and then proceeded to say, well, if he did so, that'd be just fine because the Second Amendment, your Second Amendment rights are not being infringed, even if you cannot acquire a firearm or ammunition for the foreseeable future. I know. I think it's a crazy decision, too. And we talked about it with Amy Swear, legal analyst from the Heritage Foundation. Take a look and a listen. Amy, thanks so much for coming to the program. It's great talking with you today.
It's great to be on with you, Cam.
So we saw this news out of Los Angeles, Southern California, where a U.S. district judge appointed by Barack Obama has basically, I got to say, I mean, this is such a bizarre opinion, basically said it's okay for the Los Angeles County Sheriff to shut down gun stores, even though, by the way, the sheriff has gone back and has now said, okay, gun stores can remain open. But in this lawsuit filed by NRA, Second Amendment Foundation, Firearms Policy Coalition, a couple of other groups, the judge basically used intermediate scrutiny, right? Used a lower standard of review, right, and never really even addressed the issue of whether or not gun stores and frankly, the right to keep and bear arms is essential for Americans.
Right. This is just a very odd and short opinion given sort of the gravity of what's happening here. So like you said, the first thing to keep in mind is that the LA County Sheriff has, after all of this waffling, eventually he walked back this policy. So as of right now, my understanding is that gun stores in LA County are open for business. So basically what these gun groups ended up asking for was for the judge to prohibit LA County from just randomly deciding, at some point in the future, you know what, we change our minds again, we're going to shut this down. To effectively issue an injunction, that is a restraining order saying you can't waffle on this anymore. And so the judge looked at that and he said, yep, we can allow this case to continue because you're right, there's nothing stopping the sheriff, from reinstating this policy. You talked about this idea of the standard of scrutiny, the standard of review. So for you non-lawyers out there, what the level of scrutiny is basically how hard it is for the government to prove that it really needs to enact a particular policy and that it's not unconstitutional. So normally when we're talking about laws or policies that affect fundamental rights, like the right to keep and bear arms, they're held to strict scrutiny. And that's a very, very difficult standard to reach. You would basically have to show as the LA County that there are no other options for slowing the spread of the disease other than completely prohibiting people from obtaining firearms right now in LA County. But what the judge did was use a lower level of scrutiny where the government basically gets to enact a law or policy if it's just a decent way of achieving the means of slowing the spread. And so, of course, that's a much easier standard to meet, and that's sort of what the judge went with here.
Yeah, the judge said that, quote, assuming without deciding that the county and city orders burden conduct protected by the Second Amendment by affecting the ability of law-abiding citizens to possess a handgun, intermediate scrutiny is warranted because the county and city orders are, quote, simply not as sweeping as the complete handgun ban at issue in District of Columbia versus Heller. Amy, not surprising. I disagree with the judge here. Even though this is supposedly temporary in nature, at the moment, I would say this is at least as sweeping, if not more sweeping, than the ban on handguns in Washington, D.C. that was overturned in the Heller decision, because this is now a ban on acquiring handguns, rifles, shotguns, and all ammunition.
Right. So basically what the judge said there was, this is fine. It only deserves intermediate scrutiny because it wasn't completely prohibiting possession. People who already have guns can still keep them, which wasn't the case in Heller. In D.C. in that scenario, you literally could not possess a handgun.
And hang on one second, because those who had registered their handguns before this ban went into effect, they were allowed to keep their handguns. In fact, I think Washington, D.C. had argued that there were several thousand legally owned handguns, right? Right,
and they had to keep it rendered inoperable, effectively. But regardless, the judge still misses the point here, because you're right that for people who already have guns, it's maybe not as sweeping, but for people who don't already possess a firearm, their possession, their ability to obtain a firearm and exercise their Second Amendment right, if this were to be reenacted, would be indefinitely prohibited. And why is that? Because there would be no legal way for them in California to obtain a firearm, because everything has to go through one of these gun stores.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's no gun store open in California, you have no legal way to obtain a firearm and exercise that right. So you're right in saying that even though the number it's a more limited scope of persons, just those who didn't already possess them, their right is completely eclipsed right now, in a way that is so fundamental. So this is, again, just a baffling opinion that really misses a lot of big points here.
Absolutely. And not only the acquisition of firearms, but the acquisition of ammunition is regulated to the point in California that every ammo sale has to go through a background check. So even existing gun owners who are, hoping to get, let's say, another box or two of 9mm, they're out of luck if they live in LA County. And I guess, maybe you could say, well, they can drive to another county, but we're supposed to be staying at home, right? We're only supposed to be going out where where it's absolutely necessary. And now you want people from LA County to be driving over to Riverside County or someplace like that. Again, it makes no sense. That is the entire argument for why this is intermediate scrutiny. Just basically, he said, well, because it's not as sweeping as the gun ban in Heller. He says that in applying intermediate scrutiny to the county and city orders, the court must consider whether the government's stated objective is significant, substantial, or important. And I think, Amy, you and I both agree that, it is. Public health is. And whether there's a reasonable fit between the challenged regulation and the asserted objective.
And again, this is sort of the important difference between strict and intermediate scrutiny. With intermediate scrutiny, they basically just have to show that this policy is a good way of achieving the slow of the spread. So it's a much easier standard to meet. Whereas, again, with strict scrutiny, they would essentially have to show we have no other meaningful way of doing this, no other narrow tailoring. We can't limit gun store hours. We can't make people get appointments or anything like that. This is the only way of doing this. Is to completely foreclose their ability to obtain firearms, which again is a very almost impossible standard to meet. And I think certainly given this situation would be an impossible standard to meet. So that again is that key difference when you go with intermediate scrutiny. It's just so much easier for the government to get away with this. And so, again, just a baffling decision here.
It really is. Now, I have not spoken with anybody with NRA or Second Amendment Foundation, but I am assuming that they're going to appeal this decision up to the Ninth Circuit. But I've already had a lot of folks ask me, okay, well, what does that mean? How long might that take? And I mean, I think the honest answer is it's going to take some time, right?
Right. So normally the way this works out, again, keep in mind, this is very early on in this process. This is just what we call a temporary initial injunction. So theoretically, if all things go well with coronavirus, coronavirus may work itself out and all of these, attempts at restrictions may sort of go by the wayside before this gets settled. But it's still a very important question. But so again, yes, this would go to the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit could rule on a panel, and then it could rule on bonk, and this really could drag out, again, depending on how long the Ninth Circuit says given coronavirus, we may not be meeting, we may not be having oral arguments. So we don't even know really right now what the Ninth Circuit policy might be in terms of hearing this case. And so there's really just no way of knowing how long this is going to drag out.
Yeah, you're right. I know that I think it was Friday, the Ninth Circuit 3-judge panel had oral arguments in Duncan versus Becerra, which is the challenge to the magazine ban that's currently before the Ninth Circuit. And I was kind of surprised to see that they actually held oral arguments, but it was done via video conference. So you had the 3 judges there. You had the attorney for Cal DOJ and then the attorney for the plaintiffs. And that's actually on YouTube. It's fascinating. I'll send you the link after we get done talking because it is fascinating to watch. So they are doing some of this stuff, but you're right. A lot of the court systems around the country are operating on an emergency basis now, which also, could take some time. And you talk about the importance of intermediate scrutiny versus strict scrutiny. This is one of the issues that's before the Supreme Court at the moment in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus New York City. That oral argument took place back in December. We have not seen a decision come down from the court yet. Is it possible, Amy, that the High Court could rule on that case and that decision would have an impact on some of the challenges that we're seeing to the coronavirus-related closures right now?
Well, I think in a way it could. So if you remember what that case is about, it's about, what is the scope of the right to keep and bear arms outside the home. Mm-hmm. And I think if you get a broader ruling on that, where this idea of strict scrutiny, or even just a more clear concept of what tiers of scrutiny need to be applied when, I think you could see that come out from the court with at least a little bit more guidance for lower courts. And at the very least, maybe a slap on the wrist to say, look, yes, this right to keep and bear arms, it is broader than simply getting to say, oh, well, you get to keep handguns inside your home now. So I think that the big thing that people are looking for in this case is really whether it's the court comes out with a very narrow decision that says, New York can't do this, but we're not going to tell you sort of where that line is drawn, or whether it's a broader decision that sort of announces in a sweeping, broad manner, look, the right to keep and bear arms is fundamental. It exists outside the home in a meaningful way, and that sort of gives more guidance to lower courts so that they can't do things like this and say, oh, well, we're just going to use intermediate, lower tiers of scrutiny because it's not quite as severe as what happened in Heller.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed that we get. I'd like to see that sweeping ruling from the Supreme Court. And I get the sense
you and me both. You and me both.
Well, and I get the sense that a couple of justices would like to see that ruling as well. I mean, we've seen Justice Alito, Justice Thomas, and I believe Justice Gorsuch have all basically come out and said, the lower courts are abusing what we said in Heller, and they're completely misreading it in order to uphold a lot of these gun control laws. It's time for us to set the record straight.
Yeah, and I think, too, people forget sometimes that when Kavanaugh was on the D.C. circuit, he had what I believe was a very, very good, it was a dissenting opinion, unfortunately. But he also seems to have put himself in that box of that the Second Amendment is a meaningful fundamental right, and we have to treat it that way. So I think that the big question is going to be, where does the Chief Justice fall on this, and sort of how broad of a ruling he wants here. So that's the wild card.
Yeah,
at the moment.
Absolutely, because and one of the things that you and I haven't talked about this, but one of the things that the judge in the L.A. County decision sort of ignored is. Again, the idea that at least, and it seems to be an idea that millions of Americans share, given the long lines at gun stores, that our right to keep and bear arms is more essential during times of uncertainty, during a state of emergency, than it might otherwise be, on an average Tuesday in the United States, right?
Absolutely. I mean, so we're dealing with a situation right now, and I do want to commend Americans. I think most Americans are handling this very admirably. But you are seeing a situation right now where you look at major police departments like Detroit that are just being decimated, literally decimated by COVID-19 right now, where something like 20% of Detroit's police force at one point was under self-quarantine.
Yeah.
5,000 NYPD officers last week called out sick on a single day. That's something like 18% of their entire force.
Yeah, it was up to 20% on Monday. Yeah, 20% called out sick.
It's just like mind-boggling numbers where you're seeing, I think, for the first time, a lot of Americans understand that when crises occur, law enforcement resources are stretched very, very thin. So things that, in an emergency scenario, like a robbery or something in a normal America, that might take maybe 5 minutes tops to get there. We're now seeing things where, if cops are already stretched thin, you may be on your own for a considerable, amount of time. We're even seeing right now some police departments say, look, if this isn't really a violent crime that we consider a major violent crime, we might not even come arrest the guy. So it's things like burglary, things like auto theft. You're really on your own. And I think so many Americans are feeling that for the first time. And so it's very unfortunate that, you saw LA County and right now still a number of states essentially say, yeah, you may be on your own, but we're not going to give you a gun.
Right. Now, the converse side of that is that a majority of states have taken the opposite point of view, including some states that are run by Democrat governors, right? Connecticut, Illinois, Kentucky, and a few other Democrat-controlled states have said gun stores are essential. They can remain open. I think that's the right thing to do constitutionally. I also happen to think that's the right thing to do politically because, again, you talk about how Americans are feeling right now. If Governor Northam were to come out tomorrow and say, listen, we're closing down the gun stores after all, I think that would make more Virginians feel afraid and feel concerned and add and ratchet up that psychological tension that so many of us are feeling right now. And I imagine that's the case in LA County, frankly, where people are told, unless you had the foresight to become a gun owner months ago, you're out of luck now.
Right. Yeah. And I think, too, one of the unfortunate things that's being missed, even in states like Virginia that have kept gun stores open, are states that are shutting down public indoor gun ranges. Mm-hmm. So this to me is very, very unfortunate. One, because I think constitutionally you have a right to exercise that. And two, you're dealing with a lot of people right now who are new first-time gun owners, who the first thing for them should be to, become familiar and proficient with their firearms. And when you're shutting down these public indoor gun ranges, which is where most people go to become proficient with firearms, you're shutting down that way for them to act responsibly as gun owners. And that should be the big thing that we're pushing right now is, if you're a first-time gun owner, you're new to this. One, welcome to the club. We're glad to have you. Thrilled you're here. Two, we should be pushing responsible gun ownership, being responsible with your gun, being proficient with your gun, especially in emergency scenarios where you may have to rely on it. You don't want the first time you fire your gun to be when it's a life or death scenario. And unfortunately, when you have states that are shutting down gun ranges, that's a very real scenario that might happen for people. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. And what we've seen from gun stores around the country, and I have no doubt that we would see this from gun ranges as well, is that they recognize the moment that we're in. They recognize the need to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus. You're seeing gun stores voluntarily in a lot of cases, even before these orders came down, limiting the number of customers, trying to do as much business as they can outside of the store in the open air. There are ways for these ranges to practice social distancing, right? So you don't have to have every lane full. All right, you've got to, we're going to go every 3 or 4 lanes to make sure that there's plenty of space. We're going to limit the number of staff there. There'll be one range safety officer. There are ways to do that, as you say, and still allow for individuals to get that range time. I know that we've seen the Virginia Citizens Defense League. They've written a couple of letters to Governor Northam urging him to reconsider, but they're not ruling out the possibility of litigation in that case either.
Yeah, and that's very good to hear. And I'd also point out, too, with a lot of these indoor ranges, so you're already dealing with sort of cubicled individuals, if you will, where there's sort of plexiglass between people. It's already, very good protocol to don't touch other people's things. Mm-hmm. So if anything, I think if you're going to keep gun stores open, gun ranges just make sense, as being more, they're just in a better scenario for that social distancing. And so it's just, again, just a lot of mind-boggling decisions by some governors. So again, you're right in saying that most states, I think, have gotten this correct in how they've handled the Second Amendment in this crisis.
Yeah, but most isn't all, and this is a right of all Americans, not a right of most Americans. Absolutely. Which is why we keep fighting. Amy, listen, thank you so much for coming on the program today. I really appreciate it. Hope we can do this again very soon.
Always great to be on with you.
Amy Swear from Heritage Foundation joining us here on Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. All right, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our recidivist report, our good deed of the day. We'll start with our recidivist report from Farmington, New Mexico, one of the few states in the country that has a governor that said gun stores are not essential and they must close. Look what's happening right now with violent criminals who are getting arrested for violent crimes. Farmington, New Mexico, in the northeastern part of the state. Man accused of an armed gas station robbery over about $8 worth of cigarettes, released on his own recognizance. Yeah, not even like $500 bail or anything like that. This is from the Farmington Daily Times. They report that 32-year-old Alfonso Largo, accused of a second-degree felony count of armed robbery. Okay? So felony armed robbery. Sure, we're talking about $8 worth of cigarettes. Doesn't matter. He walked into the store allegedly, armed with a knife, demanded something from the clerk. He was accused of using a knife during the robbery of the 7-Eleven gas station and taking these cigarettes. Farmington Police Department dispatched around 12:30 on the afternoon of March 30th on reports of an armed subject. Female employee at the store spoke to police as they were en route to the scene. She said a man approached the counter, pulled out a knife, pointed it at her, said, "I want cigarettes. I'm not going to hurt you." Then why have the knife? The employee said the robber took an unknown amount of cigarettes, fled the store with a man who had a backpack. Largo, located walking northbound from the scene, delayed by police. He admitted, according to police, to using a knife and pointing it at the woman in the gas station. A black and silver folding knife recovered from the defendant. He told police that his friend told him to go into the store and get some cigarettes. Yeah, well, if your friend tells you, never mind. Yeah, I'm not Largo's mom here. The employee identified Largo. Video surveillance footage from the store collected as evidence. Largo was already on probation, by the way, until 2022 after pleading guilty to a DUI charge. He also told his probation officer that he was drunk at the time of the alleged robbery, but he was walking this time, so it's all better. Way different. March 31st, he was released from the San Juan County Adult Detention Center. Defendant's preliminary hearing set for the morning of April the 8th in Farmington Magistrate Court. That would be tomorrow. We'll see if he shows up, and we'll see if he is ordered held on any type of bond. But again, right now in New Mexico, your ability to acquire a firearm for self-defense is non-existent. New Mexico, again, they have their universal background check laws, and the gun stores are closed, and there's no way to transfer a firearm, even if you were to get it from a friend. Can't do that either. That's illegal. Can't purchase ammunition because the gun stores are closed. So if you want to choose to exercise your right for your very first time in your life right now in New Mexico, you can't do it. Meanwhile, guys accused of armed robbery getting a quick trip to the county jail and then are soon on their merry way. Today's armed citizen story from St. Charles, Missouri, where a homeowner shot a home invasion suspect. According to ozarksfirst.com, this was in suburban St. Louis. The home invasion suspect, according to authorities, is recovering after being shot by the homeowner. Police in St. Charles say the man entered a home early last Thursday, and the homeowner then shot him. Police described the man's injuries as non-life-threatening. Man fled, but captured by police a short time later. Police are seeking charges against the home invasion suspect, or not seeking any charges against the homeowner, since the homeowner was acting in self-defense. And finally today, our good deed of the day from Ames, Iowa. We had the story yesterday from, Goshen, Ohio, right, where a couple of school resource officers are doing what they can to stay connected to the kids that they keep safe each and every day. And so they're going into the neighborhoods, they're delivering pizzas, they're staying 6 feet away, they're not giving high fives and handshakes, but they're doing what they can to connect with the kids. Well, the police in Ames, Iowa are doing the same thing. Sergeant Elijah Hansen, one of the many officers there in Ames, Iowa, using the current coronavirus shutdown to read books to kids online in partnership with the Ames Public Library. I love that. Green eggs and ham. According to the Ames Tribune, Officer Chad Loving also taking part in this on the over the weekend, sat on a bench outside of the police department, began reading Pete the Cat and his 4 groovy buttons. I haven't read that. I'll have to check that out. I've got a little bit of time on my hands right now these days. According to the Ames Tribune, with schools canceled until April 30th, all playgrounds and libraries in the state closed. Many kids throughout the community anxious to go outside, do the things that, kids want to do. And according to the Ames police, that's why they decided to step up and read to them. Kurt Kruger, who is the community outreach officer there in Ames, Iowa, said, "We saw a need for us to reach out into the community in some way. So a few officers got together and started making some videos of officers reading. At least for now, it gives everybody at home something to watch and the kids something to look at. And then it also lets people know that we're people too, and we're not just out enforcing laws all day long." So the police department and the Ames Library, by the way, also doing a story time program as well. They're doing that via Facebook Live. Ames Tribune says they're doing these things separate from one another, but they both share a similar goal of extending a helping hand to the community by helping to keep children engaged by reading. So there you go. Those officers in Ames, Iowa, in the right place at the right time, willing and able to pick up a book and read to kids. We thank you for your very, very good deeds. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. Coming up, I mentioned we were going to do a VIP Gold Editors Chat this week. We were going to do that, but then we realized, it's Good Friday, so let's not do that. So Monday, it'll be a great Monday because we're going to do a VIP Gold Editors Chat. If you are a VIP Gold member of Down Home Media, love to see you there. Questions, comments, we'll do this live probably around 3:30 Eastern on Monday, but I'll give you an exact time later on in the week. Don't forget, you can subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube. Make sure you never miss a program here of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. You can also do the same thing at Apple Podcasts by subscribing to Bearing Arms Cam and Company. We will be back tomorrow with the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. Until then, be safe, be well, be free, and we'll see you soon here with another Bearing Arms Cam and Company.